Hello and welcome back for another video. Today I'm going to be taking you through the first bow stroke that I teach to any beginner cellist in great depth, and that is the lower arm détaché. If you're new to the channel, my name is Julia Morneweg and here we talk in great depth about all things cello. If you like my content, please smash that like button, consider subscribing, and now you can even leave me a little tip via the link below, which helps me greatly to continue developing the channel. So without further ado, let's get started with today's topic. My students will already have learned by that point to play nice controlled long open strings using both parts of the arm independently, the upper arm and the lower arm. If you're not familiar with that concept, do make sure to check out my video, which I'm linking below, on how to achieve a nice straight bow pretty much from scratch. So that will bring you up to speed with the concept. So as soon as that is in the system, we will then really delve in quite some depth into using the lower arm on its own. Why? Why do I start with that particular bow stroke? Well, because it is pretty much the mother of all other bow strokes, non-slurred bow strokes, let's put it that way, that you are going to be learning thereafter. All the much more advanced separate bow techniques, such as actually even staccato, sautillé, later on martelé, all of those, in order to master those, we need to really have mastered the lower arm détaché first. So now I'm going to show you step by step what is a lower arm détaché and how are we going to go about achieving a technically well executed détaché. The French term détaché obviously means detached or separate. So with the term détaché, what we're really referring to is separate bows. And it's worth pointing out there are different kinds of détaché. We are today focusing on the lower arm détaché, which is mainly played in the middle to the upper half of the bow. There are also varieties of it using the lower half of the bow and indeed using the whole bow, which we'll cover another time. But it's probably worth saying that the lower arm détaché is probably the most frequently used type, and that's why we started very early on, and that's why we're devoting so much time to it. Now, what does it look like? We are using, as I said, the middle to upper half of the bow, and we are only using our lower arm, so we're hinging from the elbow. As you can hear there, it gives you a lovely resonant sound on the instrument. Why? Because we are in a part of the bow that is much lighter. Of course, most of the weight sits in the lower part where the heel is. So here we are in a much lighter part of the bow, and it's much easier to change bow direction, which means it's easier to play faster. So therefore, that is also really the first stroke that then enables us to start playing, for instance, long rows or quavers or semi-quavers, 8th notes or 16th notes. I should add for reference. So that's why it's a really useful stroke to have. Now, we are essentially using our lower arm here. We're using the elbow joint, which is a hinge joint. So it works in exactly the same way as a door. You open, you close, you open, you close, without using the shoulder joint at all. So we do not want to be using that. Now, that is actually easier said than done in my experience, and it's something which most students really struggle with at the start. So I'm going to show you 3 steps now, which I use to get students gradually, progressively to the real thing. We are starting out without the cello, with what I call a sort of exercise on dry land. What we're going to do, we're going to create a little box here. So I'm going to use my left hand to immobilize my right upper arm, like so. You see, I've got this little box. So I physically cannot move this backwards. And now I'm just going to learn to open and close. Open and close. Open and close. And you can see it works exactly in the same way as a door, yeah? So open it, elbow joint opens, elbow joint closes, elbow joint opens, elbow joint closes. There is no prize for speed here. Do it really slowly and very, very, very consciously, and really give that command: open, close, open, close. And that's something you can just do at the start of your practice for a few minutes every day, and that will already be a really, really good foundation. Next, we are trying exactly the same, but involving the cello and the bow. Now, this one is slightly trickier. You need to reach a little bit further around, so I can't go quite that low on my arm with my hand. I go a little bit further up here, and so it might feel a little bit stretchy. If you find it too stretchy, you might have to find a friendly volunteer who can help to immobilize your upper arm. So I can just about get there. So now we try to do exactly the same. Open, close. Open, close. Open, close. So if you are now trying to in any way sort of involve your shoulder and bow around the corner, you will feel that in your hand immediately. Yeah, so we don't want that. We don't want any of that, first of all, because our bow is not going to be particularly straight, which means you're not going to get a very nice sound, but also because using that joint beyond its extended range is a really, really, really good way to fill the pockets of your physiotherapist. And with all my love to them, we want to try and avoid that. So once we've done both of these steps, we are now going to try to do it without any physical restraints. It might help here to try, first of all, to do this perhaps in front of a mirror. Or by the way, if you haven't got a mirror, one very easy way to do it is also simply using either a laptop or a tablet and switching on, I don't know, either FaceTime or Zoom or something without inviting anyone is exactly the same as a mirror. So you can try that. Now, the other thing that I really recommend is I actually look to my right. I look to my right arm here, and very slowly I just give that command to my elbow to open and to close. And you can see that I'm eagle-eyed here to watch my upper arm, that nothing is moving here. So open, close, open, close, open, close. Now, why am I watching and giving these really clear instructions to my arm? Well, simply because by doing that, you are greatly helping your brain to create the new kind of pathways that it needs in order to understand, internalize, and ultimately, after a lot of practice, hopefully automate that movement. Now, hopefully, we have got the basics of a nice détaché stroke. So let's look at it a little bit more closely and what we need to watch out for. So when I'm doing that, so as you can see, hopefully now your upper arm won't be moving anymore. I warn you that will need a lot of control, a lot of patience, because it will creep back in. But let's say once you've got the basics, what else do we need to watch out for? Let's talk a little bit about the role of the wrist in this. Now, the wrist is not an active joint in that sense. I would very much compare the wrist to our ankles. Yeah, when you're running or jumping or anything, you don't particularly think about what your ankles are doing at any given point, are you? No. So they are simply a compensating joint. Yeah, they're a suspension system, and the only kind of box, if you like, that the wrist has to tick is it needs to be supple enough to cushion all of the changes. So you're not actively doing anything with the wrist, you are just making sure that it's active but supple enough to be able to get sort of, if you will, into all the sort of nooks and crannies. Yeah, so able to tell by the sound if your wrist is stiff. I'm just going to do that now. If I'm doing it with a stiff wrist, you can tell the sound is not resonant, and all the changes are very audible and they're quite creaky. Yeah, so try to, while you're doing that, before you start, just consciously, first of all, try to take 20-30% of the grip of your bow hole. Try to ease off. Don't worry, you're not going to drop the bow, nothing bad will happen. Just ease off and soften the wrist, and now go back to focusing on your arm. With fingers as well in your hand, you see probably quite a lot of movement here in my fingers when I'm doing this stroke. However, the fingers, again, they're not doing anything actively, and the analogy that I very often give with that is think of your arm as the tide, and your fingers are very much the seaweed that gets moved by the tide. Yeah, seaweed has got no control of its own over which way it wants to go. It simply gets moved by the tide, and I want you to think about your fingers the same way. Yeah, what you need to make sure is that they are the constitution of seaweed and not of rocks. So that's important. Yeah, so once you've got that stroke sussed out and it's fairly stable, the next thing that I would suggest, and that is actually a really good way to practice your scales, is pick a scale, pick one that you are finding relatively easy. You don't want to add too much complication when you're introducing something new. So I don't know, for argument's sake, I don't know, C major 2 octave or G major or something along those lines. And then you start off by doing each note 4 times. go down to doing each note 3 times. 3 times is much harder because it's going to vary. One group is starting on a down, next group is starting on an up, and be really conscious of that and make sure to show that. So up, 2, 3, down, 2, 3, up, 2, 3, so on. Then you can go to doing each note twice and ultimately just once, and that's also a really good way to build speed in your left hand. Now, if you want any more practice material, for instance, what I would suggest in the Sebastian Lee, I think it's called 40 Easy Studies in First Position, I'll put the link below. There are many studies, and I like them because they're quite short. There are many studies in there which require détaché, so it gives you lots and lots of practice material. A good piece, for instance, to implement this particular stroke would be the Lully Gavotte, so which is in the Suzuki book 3, if I'm not mistaken. So that's, maybe I'll do another video particularly on that piece in the next week or so. And yeah, so once you have got that, you have already got a really important part of your toolkit, which will help you to play sort of basic up to intermediate pieces really very competently and with a lot of control. So as usual, any comments or questions, please post them below, and I'm always happy to answer your questions. And other than that, happy practicing, and I'll see you soon.